Hi, everybody. Welcome to our technical training on PIDF-LO and Enhanced E911. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. Welcome to the training, and we'll go ahead and get started. So to start off, what we're going to talk about today is going to be a couple of things. First of all, we'll talk about static E911 versus DLR. What do those two things mean? Why do we care what those two things mean? And how do they affect you and your clients? We're going to talk about why it matters. Also, what the new changes in terms of Enhanced 911, uh, what those will entail and what you guys can expect. We'll also talk about some important links, and we'll do a quick portal demo to show partners how they will be able to implement DLR for both new clients going forward and existing clients, in addition to setting it per user, per device, 911 notifications, and of course Q&A at the end as always. So first things first, let's talk about static E911. Static E911 is the traditional legacy way that partners are used to configuring E911 and emergency services for their clients in the portal today. The way that it works is that each user and domain will have a emergency caller ID, a 10-digit phone number assigned to that user. That emergency caller ID is then provisioned to a specific address in the portal, and when that user calls 911, they will automatically display that emergency caller ID rather than their usual caller ID number. And the carrier actually has that address that was previously provisioned stored with their services, and they push that address out to the PSAP. It works very well, but there are some issues. Namely, the first thing is that it is stored with that particular carrier, so it can be problematic if you want to have any kind of failover or additional carriers or things like that. It also requires that you have at least one DID per location, because if you have people who are working from home or who have multiple locations, each of those users needs a different E911 caller ID, which can be problematic and it can get expensive very quickly because you have to pay for not only the DIDs, but also the provisioned addresses as well. And it also really did not allow for a lot of flexibility. Having one address for everyone is fine in a smaller business, but when you're talking about hospitals, campuses, any kind of large multi-building complex or multi-floor complex, it can be very difficult in an emergency for emergency services to be able to actually get to where they need to go and know where that user is. Dynamic location routing, or DLR as it's also known, is fairly similar. There are a couple of major differences though. The first being that the address is actually set in the portal and is stored with us, not with the carrier, meaning that if we do change carriers for any reason, that address is going to follow the user, going to follow the domain, and you don't have to worry about reconfiguring things later on. It is still validated on the carrier end and is still validated against USPS. So those things have not changed. It is still going to have to match what the 911 dispatcher has on file. You can still set defaults at the domain and the site level, but you will also be able to add additional location data at the domain and site level, as well as per user and per device. So I can say, being in my building, having my address, as a user, I do have the ability to say that I'm located on the second floor facing the north wall, or whatever the case may be, which is very, very useful, like I said before, in a larger area or in a larger building that might have multiple floors, multiple offices. It's very quick and easy to be able to set those different specifications if needed. The invite, because the address is being stored on the portal, it's being stored with us, the invite actually sends the address itself within the call data using PIDF-LO, which is the address object that is contained within the call, and it's contained in the SIP header and the SIP information there, so you guys will actually have it sent out and you will be able to see the address that is being pushed out from the call trace itself. We've also added the ability to notify users to update their service address when an IP address changes. So if I have my service address set to a particular address, and then I log into the manager portal from an IP address that does not match that location, I will get a pop-up in the portal notifying me and prompting me to change my address if needed, which is, of course, very, very helpful if you have people who are moving locations a lot as well. Now, why do we care? Why does it matter? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, of course, life and safety is always important, and we want to make sure that in the event of an emergency, emergency services is able to access the people that they need to access and able to get a hold of people as quickly and efficiently as possible. But additionally, there are some legal requirements, namely Kerry's Law and the Ray-Baum Act. According to both of these acts, there are three primary requirements. Firstly, callers have to be able to call 911 without the need to dial any sort of prefix. This has already been in place since prior to V39, and it's always been the case with our system. Any user can dial 911 at any point in time. Additionally, notifications should be available to be sent out to a designated 911 person or personnel when a 911 call has been made. With the addition of DLR, this is also being implemented, so you will have the ability to set notifications for people to be able to receive calls, emails, or even pop-ups on their phone when a 911 call is made, notifying them of the user and extension that made that call. You should also be able to have dispatchable location information provided to the PSAP. So traditionally beforehand, like I said before, you would be able to get away with just the address and just being able to have that building and street number as you traditionally would. Now you need actual additional, more granular information, such as the floor number, what wall they're facing, if they're in an office, what office are they in, things like that for emergency services to be able to access and know where they are without having to search the building. Now, some things to expect. First of all, static E911 is not going away. Obviously, for our existing partners, this is something that you guys have been implementing for many years, so you're going to have a lot of clients. The implementation of DLR does not mean that the use of static E911 is going to be taken away or is going to be made obsolete in any way. Your clients who currently have static E911 set will continue to be able to call 911. They will continue to be able to make emergency calls if needed, and it will not impact or affect their ability to call emergency services in any way until, before you get to move them over if needed. So that can still be used. It can also be used in combination. So if you do want to have a backup for whatever reason, if you want to have that DLR and static E911 set, you can do both, but not both are necessarily necessary. Emergency caller ID will still be present. The emergency caller ID will be used as the callback number for a client. So rather than having to have a different emergency caller ID for everyone, you might want to have a particular phone number, let's say, that goes to a ring group that rings all of the phones so that they can reach whoever's necessary, rather than having it go to a particular person or having it set on a particular address. The emergency caller ID field will be changed to be a drop-down rather than a text field. This is a requirement of having to set the emergency address, so just be aware of that, and I'll show you guys more of what that looks like in our demo here. Partners will also be able to add emergency addresses and emergency endpoints. The emergency address is the address that is going to be defined for emergency services to know where to go. The emergency endpoint is more of a billing address, and it is also where you will define the callback number that is assigned to that user. So there are going to be it's going to be more of a two-step process than traditionally that would have been with static E911. And as I mentioned previously, you will be able to configure 911 notifications either via email, via phone call, or if you have a Yealink device that is version 86 or above, or a Poly device version 5.7 or above, you will also be able to get pop-ups to your desk phone notifying you, and you will be able to control what users or what user or groups of users you would like to be able to set that on a per domain level or on a per site level as well. Some important links to keep in mind, firstly, are Partner Central. This slide deck is already posted in Partner Central, and the link is available there. Simon is also being kind enough to post it on the banner as well. We also have docs that have already been created detailing the differences between static and dynamic static E911 and DLR, as well as what those things mean and some additional links to FCC guidelines and things like that for additional reading. We also have docs on how to create emergency addresses and emergency endpoints and configuring 911 notifications. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the demo. So I'm logged in as a reseller right now. First things first, I'm going to go in to show you how to set DLR for an existing domain if you would like to get your clients migrated over from DLR to the or from static E911 to the DLR port. So we're going to go ahead and go to our Nifty Widgets domain. Here in the inventory tab, you'll notice 3 tabs. You'll see emergency endpoints, emergency addresses, and emergency numbers. When I edit my domain, you'll notice that I'll have the ability to set an emergency caller ID. If that emergency caller ID is provisioned using static E911, you will notice that it will have the legacy tag assigned to it. If it is assigned using an emergency endpoint, it will not have the legacy tag, and we'll show that in a moment here. So first things first, I'm going to add a new emergency address. I'll go ahead and use our company address here. So as always, like I mentioned before, this will validate using USPS. It will still validate against the carrier. So you will have the ability, so you will have to make sure that it matches to that address. If you guys run into issues using the address for any reason, or it does not validate for some reason, you can of course always submit a ticket to ports@OIT.co so they can validate or communicate with the 911 dispatcher for your county to try to get that registered. So here we're going to go ahead and enter our address. This is all pretty straightforward. You'll also notice a location field. So if for whatever reason, let's say the domain, everyone is in a particular area of the building or a particular section of the address, you can set a default location so that emergency services always knows to look there, even if a user does not send their own address or their own location settings. So we can put, front entrance. We'll go ahead and hit validate here. The address will, of course, show validated with the green showing you that it's been confirmed and that, suggested changes have been applied. You'll also be able to notify via phone call or via phone message, and this is where you would be able to set those settings. So if I'm going to do a notification via phone call, I will select the users that I can apply it to. Now, it will match to a user. You cannot do a phone number from here, so just if you want it to go to a cell phone number of some kind, you will have to set a call routing user to be able to do that. You can also set it per phone message, which is what I'm going to do here. And you can notify via email to notify a particular user. If you want to set some kind of distribution group, maybe like a 911 at Nifty Widgets, you can absolutely do that as well. So now that we've created our emergency address, it will automatically be populated there. We'll see it in the emergency addresses tab, and it will be listed as the domain default here with the correct address and information. Now that I've created my address, if I were to call 933 or 911, which I'll go ahead and do in a moment, you guys will be able to see the actual address information provisioned appropriately. Here in the emergency endpoints tab, you can also add endpoints, and this is where you'll add for the billing purposes. The emergency endpoint typically will be the address that you use for your own partner. So like for a reseller, you guys might use your own billing address, or you might use the client's billing address. The only difference that will occur here will be the callback number, which will be the actual number that emergency services use to call back, and this was what will be matched to in the emergency caller ID field. So we'll go ahead and hit save. It should automatically create my endpoint here. There we go. And you'll see my billing address has been added appropriately. Because this number does not apply to any of my users, it's showing 0 out of 34. If I wanted to, I could also apply my endpoint to all of the existing users and have that 911 caller ID update automatically. Now that we've got our emergency address assigned, we can go ahead and we'll have all of our users set, and this will automatically apply as the domain default to all of the users within the domain. If I want to assign it to a particular site, I can come here to the Sites tab under Users, create a new site. We'll call this Miami. Select a time zone for it. I'll do a 305 area code here. We'll select our caller ID, and again, emergency caller ID is going to be that drop down. But now that I've added my other emergency caller ID here, we have that legacy one, which is going to be using static E911, and our other one, which is provisioned to our emergency endpoint. And then we'll be able to either add a new address, or we'll be able to select our existing one. Once we've selected an existing address, we do have the ability to add location information for a particular site. So let's say this location is for the back entrance, and we'll call that back entrance. We can then go ahead and add our additional information here as always, and then we'll click Add Site. And then all of the users who belong to the Miami location, again, once created, will have that new site with that additional location information set up. Now, if I want to set these on a particular user, I can go ahead and click on that user settings here as well. I can scroll down, and under the emergency caller ID tab, again, I have the option for a legacy number, or I can select that emergency caller ID, which is provisioned to a particular endpoint. And as I mentioned previously, because I've got those domain settings here, it's already using my Nifty Widgets domain. If I wanted to add a new address, I could do so as well. Or I can use my Nifty Widgets domain and add a location description for myself. And I can say that maybe Inara is upstairs, facing the north wall. And we can go ahead and hit save. And then when Inara makes outbound calls, she will still have that address set, but it will apply as well there. Additionally, for additional devices, you can go to the Phones tab here, and any devices that a user has set, just like before, you can set that emergency caller ID. If nothing is set, of course, it will continue to match the user's caller ID, or that a user's service address that's on file. And then I can use Inara's home address, and I can select an additional location as well. And you'll notice once you've added location descriptions, they'll automatically appear here, so you will be able to reapply those locations. So if you've got people who are right next to each other, you can you can have a north wall address, and you can have that north wall address applied to both users as opposed to just one. Now that we've created our emergency services, we've configured our endpoints, we can go ahead and try making a 911 call out. Of course, I'm going to use 933, not going to alarm anyone here. 933 will also trigger emergency notifications in addition to 911. So if you do want to test and make sure that those notifications are appearing properly, you can go ahead and do so. So we're going to go ahead and dial 933. And we're going to go ahead and hit send. And when we make that call out, it'll play out, read back my service address, read back my phone number, read back my service address. And then when I close it and I go to my call history here, I do have the ability to see that 911 or 933 call having been made out to my DLR connection. And if I wanted to verify that the address was accurate, I could scroll all the way down here. And just like you see here, you will see that PIDF-LO information listed appropriately for that user. All right, now that we've gone ahead and set it up for a existing domain, and we've gone ahead and made sure that our DLR is set, I can go ahead and go to my emergency numbers tab, and I can remove that unprovisioned or that deprovisioned address. If you have a client who has a static 911 address set and no DLR, that's not an issue at all. What will happen is it will fail. The phone system will check to see if they've got if they have a PIDF-LO object set already. If not, it will fail over to the static 911 connection and make the call out using the provisioned 911 number that is set on their emergency caller ID. Test will show in cradle to grave, yes, as well. I don't believe it will show the address information. It will just show that a call was made outbound. If you wanted to see the actual address, you would have to use the call trace in the SIP flow. All right, so going into the creating a new domain. When you create a new domain, you're going to have the same kind of information as before. So we'll call this, new domain. These settings are going to remain almost exactly the same. The only difference will be, of course, that when you go to the emergency numbers tab, when you go to the emergency numbers tab, you will have that emergency caller ID and you will have that address to set. And because, of course, like I mentioned before, this will turn into a drop-down. You're going to want to set the address that you would like to use, and then you'll create the emergency address and the endpoint. So we'll do phone number here. We'll enter the same information. We'll go ahead and click add. Once you've clicked add, you will be able to set emergency notifications. You might notice I don't have the ability to do so here or when I was creating my site. A domain has to be existing to have already set or to be able to set notifications for it, as does a site. So once they've already been created, you can then go back and edit it and add any emergency notifications that need to be done. And that's pretty much it. Migrating clients, setting up new clients, it's fairly straightforward. One thing to note, when you do edit domains, if you do not have a DLR address set, you will be prompted to create one once implemented. So just be aware of that, guys. You will, as you modify domains and make changes to domains and things like that, you will be prompted for it. So you will be able to set your clients up in a very natural, organic way. Does anybody have any questions about DLR or E911? Want to give everybody a chance to type or post if they have anything. So as Ray pointed out, I did not mention a release date. So kind of him to note it to mention. So the 911 notifications, first off, are already available in the portal. You guys might need to log out and log back in. But once you do so, you can edit domains and sites, and you will see that those are already available. You don't need to have DLR implemented to be able to use those. So we have already released that for you. As for the actual DLR implementation, that should come out sometime next week. We will be doing an upgrade to the portal, and we will be sending out a notice of planned maintenance, just as we always do. And with that planned upgrade will come the release of DLR in that same update. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that is everything. I must have done a really great job. As always, guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to email support@oit.co. You'll also have our docs available, voipdocs.io. And there's, of course, in the hosted voice, the E911 section, which already has all of the docs published. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, guys.